Welcome to this 365 Freedom Strategy session. Today we're breaking down mechanics of aligned storytelling and why your biggest brand bottleneck is the story you're still hiding.
Right.
And we are treating this time together precisely as an internal strategic partnership. You are here because you're looking at your operations, your marketing, your authority in your space, and you're sensing a ceiling.
Yeah, you've hit a wall.
Exactly. You're putting in the hours, you're executing on the standard advice, yet the growth feels, it feels incredibly disproportionate to the effort. So our mission today is to dissect the source material from the art of aligned storytelling. Specifically, we're looking at the Week 4 StorySell curriculum to really understand the raw mechanics of alignment.
Yes.
We're going to look at exactly how the narrative you are currently avoiding is creating massive, just invisible friction in your daily business growth.
And let's set the tone right out of the gate here. This is not, we are not doing fluffy self-help today.
No, definitely not.
We're not here to talk about, finding your bliss in some abstract, intangible way. We're taking a hard, unsentimental look at brand authority and identity mechanics. When we talk about your story, we are talking about the core asset that drives your market positioning.
Right.
If your story is misaligned, your marketing is inefficient, your sales cycles are longer, and your authority is fundamentally compromised.
Yeah.
We need to approach this with the exact same rigor we would apply to analyzing a broken sales funnel or a misconfigured ad campaign.
Yeah, because if an ad campaign is failing, you don't just, throw more money at it. You look at the copy, you look at the targeting.
You look at the core offer. Right now, the bottleneck isn't the algorithm. The bottleneck is the incongruence between who you are operating as and who you are actually becoming. So let's get to work.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core anchor quote from the source material, the one that really sets the foundation for this entire strategy session, is this. Your story aligns when who you are becoming finally matches the truth you have been carrying for years.
That's the one.
And that is a highly specific, almost intimidating definition. It does not say your story improves when you hire a better copywriter.
No.
It does not say it improves when you finally figure out TikTok. It explicitly ties alignment to a match between your emerging identity and a pre-existing long-held truth.
Exactly.
To really understand this, we have to look at the technical difference between changing your brand and aligning your brand. And I want to pause here because I think, change is the default setting for most founders, right?
Right.
When things aren't working, the immediate impulse is just, I need to change everything.
Right, and that impulse is exactly where most founders completely derail their own progress. Let's analyze why the very concept of change creates so much paralyzing friction for you as a founder. When you sit down at your desk and tell yourself, I need to change my brand story, or I need to change my positioning, you are immediately operating from a deficit.
Right. You're already behind.
Exactly. Change, in this context, implies that your current state is fundamentally flawed, that it's lacking or entirely wrong. It demands that you scrap the foundation and manufacture a new persona entirely from scratch.
Which is
It feels loud, it feels dramatic, and honestly, from an operational standpoint, it is incredibly exhausting. You are essentially trying to invent a fictional character that you then have to play every single day in your business.
But let me push back on that for just a second. If a founder's business is stagnating, if their revenue is dropping, shouldn't they view their current state as flawed? Isn't change exactly what the market is demanding of them in that moment? If my messaging isn't converting, I have to change it.
We'd have to adapt your tactics, yes. But we are talking about your core narrative here, the identity of the brand. When a founder tries to manufacture a change in their identity to appease a dropping conversion rate, they don't look inward. They look outward.
They look at the competition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They look at who is currently winning in their space, and they try to put on that person's clothes. They adopt a tone of voice that isn't theirs. They start using jargon that feels completely unnatural. They try to manufacture a persona based on what they think the market wants to buy right now.
Right.
And that is what is so exhausting. You are right that the strategy might need to pivot, but when you try to change the core truth of who you are as an authority, you introduce massive operational friction.
That makes perfect sense. It's like putting on this heavy, suffocating costume every single time you draft an email or record a video or hop on a sales call.
Yes.
The mental energy required to sustain a manufactured change is it's entirely unsustainable. You end up with that kind of bone-deep fatigue that comes from holding up a mask for 8 hours on Zoom calls, only to just crash at 6 p.m. because you've spent the whole day translating your actual thoughts into what you think your industry wants to hear.
Exactly.
But the text provides a stark contrast to this. It notes specifically that alignment does not feel like change. It feels like recognition. That is a massive operational shift.
It is the defining shift. Alignment is the exact moment the inner identity and the outer expression finally match. You aren't building a new house from the ground up. You are finally turning the lights on in the one you already own.
I love that analogy.
When you try to force a change, you're pushing against your own grain. But recognition is simply acknowledging a truth that already exists. It requires zero manufacturing. You are no longer wasting precious cognitive bandwidth trying to figure out what you should say or how you could sound to appease the market. You simply identify the truth you've been carrying, and you let it dictate the narrative.
So for the listener sitting at their desk right now, what does this actually look like in practice? Because as a strategic partner, you're probably looking at your engagement metrics or your audience retention and wondering why it feels like you're constantly pushing a boulder uphill. When you try to change your brand story to fit a perceived market demand, it feels forced. And make no mistake, your audience possesses a highly sensitive radar for inauthenticity. They sense the friction. They sense that you are playing a role.
They absolutely do.
Yeah.
The market is completely saturated with manufactured personas. Consumers, your prospective clients, your strategic partners, they are fundamentally exhausted by performance.
Yeah.
When they encounter a founder who is operating through the lens of forced change, they don't consciously think, this person is acting. I can tell they're using a framework they don't believe in.
Right. It's not that analytical.
No, not at all. Instead, they just feel a lack of trust. It's a subconscious repulsion. They feel a slight hesitation to buy, a reluctance to engage. That hesitation is the bottleneck. It's not that your pricing is necessarily wrong or that your product is bad. It's that the energy you're transmitting is incongruent. When you align your story, you are doing something entirely different. You're simply removing the friction between your daily actions and your core beliefs.
The story stops contradicting the life. I really want to highlight that specific concept from our notes because it functions as the ultimate diagnostic tool. If you are exhausted by your own marketing, if the thought of posting on social media or writing your newsletter fills you with a sense of dread, it is highly likely that your story is contradicting your life.
Yes.
You're selling a methodology, a product, or even a version of yourself that you no longer fully believe in or that you have simply outgrown.
And that contradiction is expensive.
So expensive.
It costs you time, it costs you authority, and it costs you actual revenue. The mechanics of alignment dictate that efficiency comes from truth. When your outer expression matches your inner conviction, your marketing becomes effortless. Your sales conversations become direct and authoritative. Think about it. When you're speaking a truth you deeply believe, you stop over-explaining.
Oh, that's a great point, the over-explaining.
Right. You don't feel the need to justify every single point with 5 different case studies and endless caveats because the truth doesn't require defense.
Yeah.
It simply requires articulation. The confidence is built in.
This brings us perfectly to the mirror reflection micro-story provided in the source material. It's a brilliant illustration of how subtle this recognition actually is. The narrator describes catching the reflection in the mirror and pausing longer than usual.
Yeah.
But the text is very careful to specify that this pause had absolutely nothing to do with physical appearance. They weren't checking their outfit or looking for wrinkles. They paused because they suddenly saw who they were becoming. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic makeover. It was a moment of internal realization projecting outward.
What's fascinating here is the text's assertion that the narrator had carried a quiet belief for years that they were meant to build something of their own. They never said it out loud. Think about the strategic implications of that quiet belief. In business, we're often taught that breakthroughs must be these explosive, paradigm-shifting events.
Right, the lightning bolt.
Exactly. We expect the lightning bolt. We are conditioned to look for the massive disruption. But alignment is not a sudden breakthrough. The text is explicit about this. It is a gradual realization of a truth that has been sitting in the background all along.
Years. The text actually says 4 years. I really want to emphasize that timeline for the listener. That means for years, this person was operating at a fraction of their capacity because they were suppressing their own baseline ambition. For years, they were doing good work, maybe even great work, but it wasn't their true work.
Exactly.
As a founder listening to this, you have to ask yourself what quiet belief you are currently suppressing. What is the truth about the business you actually want to run, the clients you actually want to work with, or the level of authority you actually want to claim that you have kept deliberately hidden?
And we have to examine why we keep it hidden. Because we are conditioned to believe that claiming our ambition requires some sort of grand justification. We think we need a dramatic backstory to earn the right to lead. But the text strips all of that away. It describes alignment as not dramatic, not loud, just honest.
Yeah.
This is a crucial metric for evaluating your own brand narrative. Are you trying to be loud, or are you trying to be honest? Because loud is just volume. Honest is resonance.
That is a huge point. It is so incredibly common for founders to feel this immense pressure to construct a cinematic aha moment for their brand origin story. You see it all the time on About Me pages and in keynote speeches.
Oh, constantly.
People try to write this heroic three-act structure where they hit absolute rock bottom, lost everything, walked through a metaphorical desert, and then had a singular epiphany on a mountaintop that changed everything. And if they don't have that cinematic moment, if their reality was just that they were bored at their corporate job and wanted to make their own hours, they feel like their story isn't valid.
Yeah, they feel like they have to spice it up.
Exactly. But the source material completely invalidates that pressure.
It does, because forced drama is just another form of hiding. If you have to dress your story up in cinematic tropes to make it compelling, you are still avoiding the raw mechanics of alignment. You are still manufacturing a persona. The most powerful market-dominating stories do not stem from manufactured drama. They stem from a quiet, unwavering, honest acceptance of one's own ambition.
Yes.
It is the simple statement, I realized I was capable of more, and I stopped pretending otherwise. That level of honesty cuts through the noise of a crowded market faster than any engineered origin story ever could. When a potential client hears you speak with that level of unadorned truth, they immediately recognize you as an authority. They don't need the Hollywood backstory because they can feel the conviction in the present moment.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We have to look at exactly how founders suppress this quiet belief, because it's rarely a conscious act of self-sabotage. It's not like you wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and say, today I'm going to actively undermine my own potential.
Right. Nobody does that.
It is usually disguised as competence. The text zeroes in on this when the narrator admits they tucked it away behind responsibilities, routines, and the kind of practical thinking that convinces you to wait for the right time. Practical thinking. That is the primary mechanism of sabotage.
This is perhaps the most critical bottleneck we will discuss today, and we need to spend some serious time here. Let's do a rigorous analysis of why founders actively sabotage their own authority using the shield of practicality. Practical thinking, in the context of avoiding your true ambition, is entirely deceptive.
It looks good on paper.
It looks exactly like strategic planning. It looks like responsibility. It looks like you are being a smart, cautious CEO. You tell yourself, I'll launch the real brand when I hit a specific revenue goal, or I'll start speaking my actual mind on these industry panels when I have a larger audience, or I just need to finish this one routine operational task. Let me just rebuild this CRM. Let me just optimize this landing page for the 50th time before I step into that new identity.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for the listener. Isn't being practical the entire point of running a sustainable business? If I'm a founder and I ignore my routines, ignore my responsibilities, and just start broadcasting my raw ambition without a plan, aren't I just being reckless? How do we separate necessary operational practicality from the kind of practical thinking the text is warning us about?
That is the exact trap, and it's why this form of hiding is so insidious. Of course, you have to run your business. You have to manage payroll, deliver on client promises, and maintain your operations. But the practical thinking the text refers to is not about business administration. It is about emotional avoidance, dressed up as business administration.
Wow. Emotional avoidance dressed up as business administration.
It is using those routine tasks as an excuse to delay your evolution.
Yeah.
You know the difference internally. When you are doing a task because it is a genuine needle mover, you feel a sense of momentum. But when you are redesigning your logo for the third time this year, or spending 4 hours debating the hex code of a button on your website instead of writing the controversial op-ed you know your industry needs to hear, that is not practicality. That is fear wearing a business suit.
It's the perpetual waiting for the right time trap. You hide behind the busy work. It feels like work. It exhausts you like work, but it's actually hiding. You are choosing the comfort of the checklist over the vulnerability of leadership.
Precisely. When you prioritize comfortable routines and what seems logical over the raw truth of your ambition, you are actively watering down your message. You are diluting your market presence. You are choosing the safety of the known over the authority of the aligned. You convince yourself that the market isn't ready for your true perspective or that you haven't earned the right to say it yet.
And the market feels that.
The market recognizes this hesitation immediately. They sniff it out. Authority is not granted to those who wait for the perfect conditions. It is claimed by those who act in alignment with their convictions, regardless of the conditions. If you wait until everything is perfectly safe and perfectly practical, you will be waiting forever.
And the cost of this hiding is astronomical. It creates the ultimate brand bottleneck. We are talking about the daily operational reality of your business, the actual dollars and cents. If you, as the founder and the strategic lead, dismiss your own story and delay your own evolution, you are implicitly training your audience to dismiss you too.
That is the exact mechanism. Your audience takes their cues entirely from you. Think of your brand as a tuning fork. Whatever frequency you strike is the frequency the market will resonate with. If your messaging is tentative, if it is wrapped in layers of safe, practical, industry-standard jargon because you are afraid to step into the truth of what you are actually doing, your audience will respond with tentative engagement.
They match your energy.
Exactly. They will bargain with your pricing. They will question your boundaries. They will treat you as a commodity rather than an authority. You cannot demand high-conviction buying behavior from an audience if you are providing low-conviction, compromised storytelling.
You are modeling the hesitation you're experiencing. If you don't trust your own value enough to state it plainly, why would the person reading your sales page trust it enough to hand over their credit card?
Exactly. You are projecting your internal delay onto your market. You are telling them, through your own lack of alignment, that your offer is not urgent, that your perspective is not essential, and that your authority is still up for debate.
So what is the antidote to this cycle of practical procrastination? We find it in the text's realization. You realize you are no longer the person who stays quiet about what you want. Moving from silence to authority requires a brutal discarding of that safety net. It means looking at your daily task list and identifying which tasks are genuine needle movers and which are just practical excuses to stay quiet.
It requires a relentless audit of your own compliance. Are you complying with an outdated version of your industry, or worse, an outdated version of yourself? The text explicitly states, you are not the version of yourself who dismisses your own story. To execute on this, you have to systematically dismantle the practical excuses. You have to stop waiting for the external validation of the right time and recognize that the time is dictated entirely by your internal alignment. The moment you recognize the truth, the time is now.
Let's expand on that concept of external validation because it perfectly transitions us into the next major theme from the source material, the battle between alignment and approval. The text describes the reflection in the mirror as someone who cared more about alignment than approval, someone who finally trusted her own story enough to let it guide her instead of scare her. We need to talk about shifting the compass from external validation to internal truth.
Let's break down the mechanics of approval seeking. Because it is a fundamentally losing strategy in storytelling, marketing, and business strategy as a whole. And we need to be honest about how pervasive this is. We are trained from day one in the digital economy to seek approval. The platforms we use are built on it. Likes, shares, comments, retweets, these are all metrics of approval.
Right.
When your primary metric for success becomes approval, you are allowing external forces to dictate your operational reality. You are no longer steering the ship. You are trying to fit an external mold that is constantly changing shape.
And when you try to fit an external mold, you inevitably start contradicting your actions. Let's paint a picture of what this looks like for the listener. Imagine you run a coaching consultancy. You know deep down that your industry is broken, because it coddles clients instead of holding them accountable. That is your aligned truth.
Good example.
But you also know that posting a controversial take about this will upset some of your peers, and it might cost you a few followers. So instead of writing the bold, honest piece, you write a watered-down, generic post about 5 tips for productivity. You get your likes, you get your approval, but what have you actually accomplished?
You have accomplished nothing, and you have actively damaged your brand. You end up with a fragmented brand. You write one piece of content to appease a certain segment of your audience and another piece to impress your peers, and maybe a third piece to satisfy an algorithm. None of it is anchored in your actual truth. The issue with approval is that it is inherently unstable. The demands of the crowd are constantly shifting. If you build your brand identity on the shifting sands of public approval, you will spend your entire career reacting rather than leading. You will always be one step behind, trying to guess what people want to hear today. Alignment, on the other hand, is a fixed point. It provides a stable, unshakable foundation for decision-making.
So, what does this all mean? How does a founder actually execute on this? Because it's easy for us to sit here and say, stop caring what people think. But when your livelihood depends on attracting clients, the fear of losing approval is visceral. How do you let your story guide you when the pressure to seek approval is so deeply ingrained?
Trusting the narrative means acting on the truth you have been carrying, even when it carries a short-term cost. And let's be absolutely clear, there is almost always a cost. This is the part that most strategy sessions gloss over. When you stop acting like the old, practical, approval-seeking version of yourself, you will alienate people. You will alienate the audience members who preferred the watered-down, unthreatening version of your brand. You will alienate the clients who only wanted to pay you for the safe, routine work and who don't want to be challenged by your new level of authority.
Letting the story guide you instead of scare you. The fear is real. The fear of losing that approval, of seeing the subscriber count drop, of getting pushback in your inbox.
Yes, the fear is real, but as a strategic partner, you must recognize that this alienation is not a failure. It is a necessary filtering mechanism. It is the shedding of dead weight. By prioritizing alignment over approval, you are actively selecting for a higher caliber audience. You are drawing in the people who resonate with the uncompromised version of your vision. That is how you build sustainable, unshakable authority. You stop trying to convince people to like you and you start leading the people who recognize your truth. If you try to appeal to everyone, your message becomes so dilute that it moves no one. True authority requires a willingness to be polarizing.
I want to really dig into that idea of the filtering mechanism, because if you are hiding your story, you are essentially tricking people into following you. You are presenting a false front, and they are buying into that false front. When you finally align, the people who leave are the people who were never aligned with your truth in the first place. They were aligned with the mask you were wearing. Losing them isn't a loss of revenue, it's a clearing of the pipeline for the clients who will actually value what you uniquely provide.
Exactly. And the energy you get back from not having to maintain that mask is what fuels the next stage of your growth. When you stop caring about approval, you reclaim all the cognitive bandwidth you were wasting on second-guessing yourself. You can pour that energy into product development, into higher-level strategy, into serving the clients who actually want your unvarnished expertise.
Let's look at the timeline of this entire process, because the text gives us a very specific diagnostic tool for identifying the phase right before alignment happens. This is crucial for the listener. If you are listening to this and wondering, am I aligned? Am I missing this entirely? How do I know if I'm in the middle of this process right now? Okay, the text points us to the blog post section of the curriculum. It notes that for people starting an online business or leaving the 9-to-5, or even scaling an existing business to a new tier, alignment does not come first. What comes first is restlessness.
Restlessness is the leading indicator. It is the primary data point you need to be tracking. It's the canary in the coal mine. The text uses highly specific, visceral language here, a whisper, a tug, a feeling that your life no longer matches who you know you could be. If we connect this to the bigger picture of business growth, too often, when founders feel this restlessness, they misdiagnose it. They think it's burnout. They think they just need a vacation, or a new productivity app, or a different morning routine. But this friction is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is the physical and psychological manifestation of outgrowing your current container.
It's the discomfort of the shell becoming too tight. The hermit crab needs a new shell, and the process of finding it is inherently uncomfortable.
Precisely. This friction is tactical data. When a founder feels that restlessness, when they feel a sudden inexplicable resentment toward their current client roster, or sheer boredom when they look at their own marketing materials, or a persistent nagging feeling that they're playing too small, even when the revenue looks fine on paper, that is not a mindset issue to be meditated away. That is a structural issue. It indicates that your current brand architecture or your current operational model is too small to house your emerging identity.
I want to focus on those symptoms for a moment, because resentment and boredom are huge red flags. If you are a founder and you find yourself dreading a call with a client who pays you well, that is restlessness. If you look at your website and feel absolutely no connection to the words on the screen, that is restlessness. The text instructs us to honor it. It says, if you are noticing this shift within yourself, honor it. But honoring it is terrifying, because honoring it means disrupting the status quo. The shift into alignment happens the exact moment you stop ignoring the restlessness and acknowledge you are becoming someone new, someone who, as the text brilliantly puts it, no longer needed permission to want more.
What's fascinating here is that phrase, no longer needed permission. That is the absolute crux of operational freedom. If we look closely at how most founders operate, they exist in a perpetual state of seeking permission. Permission from the market to raise their prices. Permission from their peers to launch a new, unconventional methodology. Permission from their own deeply ingrained self-doubt to claim a higher level of authority. They're waiting for someone to tap them on the shoulder and say, "You are officially allowed to be great now." Honoring the shift means recognizing that the authority has already been granted internally. The restlessness is the signal that the internal shift has already occurred. You don't need permission to align your outer world with your inner reality. It is an imperative. It is time to execute.
Which brings us to the execution phase, the tactical directive. The source material doesn't just leave us with philosophy. It doesn't just tell us to feel our feelings and hope for the best. It gives us a direct, actionable command across the call to action, the short-form video script, and the social media posts. The command is uniform and highly specific. Write the version of yourself you are becoming. Let that story guide your next step. This is where we move from theory to hard strategy. This is where we take the abstract concept of alignment and turn it into a tangible business asset.
We are using identity as a strategy. I want to be very clear about this. This is not a casual journaling exercise.
Yeah.
This is not about writing down your dreams in a diary. When the text instructs you to write the version of yourself you are becoming, it is telling you to draft a strategic positioning document. By explicitly writing down this emerging identity, you are creating a tangible, objective compass for your brand. You are taking the abstract internal truth, that quiet belief you've been carrying for years, and forcing it into the outer world. You are making it real.
You are creating the blueprint for the alignment. If you don't write it down, it remains a whisper. It remains a feeling. But the moment you put it on paper, it becomes an operational standard.
Correct. And this raises an important question that every listener needs to ask themselves right now, today. Are your daily business actions reflecting the person you were or the person you are becoming? Think about your immediate reality. Look at the last 5 emails you sent to your list. Look at the last piece of content you published on LinkedIn or Instagram. Look at the proposal you just sent to a prospect. Was that generated by the past version of yourself who prioritized safety, practical thinking, and approval? Or was it generated by the future version of yourself who operates with aligned authority?
That is a brutal audit. Because if you look at those last 5 emails and they sound like they were written by someone who is terrified of offending anyone, then you are not aligned. You are still hiding. Writing down the becoming gives you a rubric against which you can measure every single operational decision. If the person you're becoming does not discount their services, then the next time a prospect asks for a discount, you consult the document. The document says no, the decision is made, the friction is eliminated.
Exactly. It removes the emotional weight from the decision-making process. You aren't agonizing over whether to take on a bad fit client because you need the money. You were simply consulting the strategy. The strategy dictates that the aligned version of you does not compromise on fit.
The final piece of this execution strategy comes from the Facebook and Instagram post text provided in the source material. It states, "Alignment is not something you chase, it is something you allow." I want to linger on this because it represents a profound shift in how we are taught to approach business development. We are conditioned by hustle culture to chase everything. We chase goals, we chase revenue, we chase influence, we chase followers. But alignment requires allowing. It begins, according to the text, when you stop pretending you want less.
The energy expenditure of pretending you want less is staggering. It is the unseen tax on your business. Founders burn out not from working too hard, but from the friction of suppressing their true capacity. They burn out from the effort of playing small. Allowing alignment means taking your foot off the brake. It means you stop manufacturing artificial delays. You stop constructing elaborate practical excuses about why you aren't ready. You simply allow the true story, the massive, unapologetic ambition you have been carrying for years, to dictate your business strategy. You step out of your own way.
It's the ultimate removal of the brand bottleneck. You stop being the obstacle to your own growth. You stop managing the perception of your brand, and you start leading from the truth of it. And when you do that, the market responds. They don't respond to the perfection of the message. They respond to the alignment of the messenger.
We spent this session talking about the danger of hiding behind practical thinking. But consider this. What if playing it practical isn't just stalling your growth, but actively cementing a legacy of compromise? The longer your story contradicts your life, the harder it becomes to remember what your truth even looks like.
If you're ready to align your inner truth with the story you tell the world, visit 365 Freedom online. This has been a 365 Freedom Strategy session.